My name is Paula Schwarz and I'm from Greece and from Germany.
What's it like being from Greece and Germany? So you speak 3 languages?
I speak 5 languages and it's very confusing to be from both countries because I have a very deep relationship with both of them.
What languages do you speak?
Speak German, Greek, English, French, and like Italian. I also speak a little bit of Hindi, a little bit of Russian. Yeah.
So where were you born exactly?
In Munich.
Okay. Born in Germany. What do you feel more close to your German roots or your Greek, or is it kind of equal for you?
I think my roots are in my heart and not in a country. So I'm just as close to the American culture, to be honest, because I spend a lot of time there. Yeah, I'm very close to the Russian mentality because they're very direct. I like Indians because they can dance and they can just, they don't take themselves too seriously. I think I'm kind of from Afghanistan because I like to hide and then attack. So I have a lot of cultures in me.
Would you consider yourself like an activist of sorts? And if so, what are you fighting for?
Are we already in the interview now?
Yeah, I figured we would just start. But also, can you maybe
remove the water?
Or move it to the left. Yeah, that's good.
So, do I consider myself an activist? I'm a total activist, yes. From the bottom of my heart. And an activist, I guess, is defined by taking action. And so this action that I'm trying to live, actually, not to take all the time. I don't like to do things, but to feel like I am already the change. So it's not, one action is very relevant because then it leads to the next action, but the motivation of an activist should always come from her or his core. And so I get up in the morning super early, and already I know that I have a passion in my heart that that is something like a job that I have to do while I'm here. And everything in my life has led me to this point now. So I know I'm prepared, I know it's time, I know school of life has happened, and so every rational reason that people can find is totally irrelevant when you have found your mission and it makes no sense what I'm doing.
So,
I mean, it does make sense, right? But
what do you do? How do you describe what you do to a layman who doesn't understand your field? Just if someone on the street asked you, like, so what exactly do you do?
Well, it's great because...
Can you start it like, say...
When people ask me?
Yeah.
So when people ask me what I do, and I tell them about datanomics and the World Datanomic Forum, I usually link it to the story of stepping out of the World Economic Forum and of the fact that we have massive overproduction in many sectors with things that are not needed in this vastness anymore, and that if we organize things differently, we can feed more people, we can supply more people with all kinds of things, and we can also, paint a very clear picture of the fact that things are more equally distributed and people are empowered based on data. And so many times when I explain that, then people say, oh, okay, so datanomics is really about calculating what's there, how many people are there, what their needs are, and just putting that into a frame. And, you know, in my previous jobs, I had to do a lot of explaining. And with this job, I drop the sentence datanomics, and then they come up with the right explanation for it. So it's very comfortable for someone who normally doesn't like to beat around the bush too much with explanations.
Is there anything that you're excited about launching or seeing the result of this collaborative effort of the Datanomic Forum? Maybe I'm hinting at going into the project in Athens.
So what's been very exciting about the launch of the World Datanomic Forum is that from the very beginning it was not intentional, and the best things in my life have just, you know, fallen in front of me somehow, or life punched me in the face somehow. And so it was really just this idea of a Datanomic Forum, of a World Datanomic Forum, where people organize resources in a more just and more understandable way, I guess, away from any lobbyism and protectionism and, you know, brands that are trying to protect their market, but to really think what is best for the people. Because we have so much evidence today, and we're very smart, we can know that, and it doesn't have to lead to everyone just eating one type of food or just, you know, using one brand. I think that's more where we're going in the current system, where because of this intransparency there's massive monopolies also happening. If you look at Google, for example, this intransparency has allowed them to grow a power structure. But in regards to the World Datanomic Forum, it was also the case that I did not intend to launch it. I just thought it was a good idea. I dropped out of the World Economic Forum just because I believe in datanomics, and it's a lifestyle, and it has changed my life to the very, very core of it. And so then a lady from my network in the Huffington Post actually said, you know, your statement, your public statement would be so much more powerful if you would not say, I think someone should launch the World Datanomic Forum, but I'm going to launch the World Datanomic Forum. And so she suggested it, and I didn't want to do it because I'm a super introvert, and I was so afraid of too many people around me everywhere. And like, you know, I've been to Davos twice, and it's really not my game to stand on stages anymore, because I believe in systemic change. And so this was also, you know, life just gives you this World Datanomic Forum, and then suddenly out of a coincidence people picked up on it from also very large tech companies, and then immediately I was in one-on-one talks with their top executives. Then a lot of people from also high net worth sort of networks started sending me data, and this is very private data, actually. And as a person who does look at the numbers as the feedback from the outside, I was amazed to see that there is such a response. And then, you know, there was a moment when I went to my home country, Greece, to meet with these executives from these corporates who were very interested. And I meditate a lot. So in my meditation, I just thought that it would be a good idea to call my contacts up who are in Greece, who are in the government. I thought it would be a good idea to call my contacts up who are also in the Greek state. And I was sitting there for 4 hours. And so now we have a very close working relationship. And it's just beautiful to see at least the problem untangling. If you can see the problem, then it's so much easier to work with it. And if it's such a jungle after 10 years of crisis, so now I'm kind of prioritizing in Greece the level of problems that we have, and I'm looking at also higher education, you know, since there's a brain drain in the country. I'm looking at also transportation inefficiencies and trade inefficiencies. And then you can have sort of comparative studies with other countries who have done this extremely well and paint a picture of how much money is being lost and how high the taxes are, even though they would not have to be this high. And thereby to do a kind of foresighting, to say, here's fragmentation, this is a very inefficient system, and based on comparative studies with existing models, this is our recommendation. And we can tell you that you would, you know, cut your costs of governance by at least 20%. Estonia cut the governmental costs by 60% now through their efficient structuring. So obviously for me it's the most important thing to save my home, save my country, and yeah, this is what I'm very excited about, because I've never been able to see the problem so clearly. And the people who are interested to look at the potential answers that we've come up with are already in the forum. That's wonderful. And also the forum is set up in a decentralized way, where there's different smaller forums, both offline and online, where people come together, and we call them datathons. So they come together and they curate data. They also give sometimes an understanding of why a situation is a certain way. And many datathons come in stages, so that first the techies get together, and then we have a kind of design thinker who helps them work with the politicians, because otherwise it's a culture conflict between them. And this decentralized structure allows for me to be silent and in meditation a lot. And it's not a one-man show. It has nothing to do with me.
So you're doing something that, well, let me just go back to my questions, because I want to touch on a lot of things, but you covered a lot of it already, like answered a lot of my questions in that.
Oh, sorry.
It's great. It's great. Yeah, let's just go back to like a little bit about like early on. How did you gain your passion for science, or do you remember, like, was there any moment in your life when you realized like this is what you wanted to do, or did that kind of come later?
I mean, when I was so the question is, when did I discover my passion? So when I was a kid, I was very silent, and I was always like looking around places because I thought the world was so interesting, and it was very annoying for me that, you know, other kids always wanted to play games. Like I had one friend who always wanted to play family and school, And, you know, then I was thinking, like, the world is so interesting. Why do you want to set up a scenario? That doesn't make sense for me. And so, like, now that I'm older, I can tell that there was something in my brain and in my heart that, like, wanted to just understand. I thought there was too much noise everywhere. But I had forgotten that throughout my life. And so I think I knew my passion very early, and I rediscovered it to get out of this, I'm not a big fan of this one-man show. You have to have a university degree, you have to have a number on your bank account to be really important. You have to I guess I didn't like the fact that soft factors mattered so much, and I just wanted to. It was a professional. Can we go back?
Sure.
So when I was a child, I always saw people who were, okay, now I'm gonna have a whiskey.
Okay, you want me to give for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Woo!
You're doing great.
I don't know, the last one I fucked up totally.
No, there's no fucking up. Do you want ice?
No, thanks, I'm good.
Now that you covered your bases, you can have a glass.
Yeah. I don't know. It's also interesting to talk about this. Like, normally I used to be very good at, like, making up my own story, and now I guess I'm less egocentric. And the datanomics thing just comes, And now that you asked me about my relationship to the topic, because I can't really say to people, oh, I smoked DMT, and then I saw I was right with everything that I was always thinking, and I started to just trust my own brain, because that's what I would like to say.
Well, you don't have to, mention DMT if you don't want to, but you could just say,
You think I could say that, even?
Well, you could, why not? We can decide how we want to project it later. I think it's nice just to get it out there.
I would love to say that.
You should. It's not.
Yeah, it's nothing bad.
Against it morally, and you don't.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful to this. Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking about the revelations of thought and what gave you this burst of inspiration or insight. Was there a moment?
So I guess for my entire life, I just felt very lost because I come from a very rich family, and I just like to understand things because also as a kid, I have this tendency of, just wanting to stand there and look at stuff and just get it, I like to get stuff. And so as a child, you could just put me somewhere and I would just stare at stuff and I would just try to understand. But all this money and all this social noise were constantly kind of pulling me away from that. And so, I don't know, on my way to becoming an adult, I lost my connection to science because I was meant to, be important and be on stages and have a very interesting job that people find interesting and just be someone. And more and more I got to then realize that people do that a lot. They try to be someone when they don't have the security in themselves. And so then there was a point in my life where I was on the Greek islands working, in tech for the refugee crisis, because I had taken the step away from this high society. I think when you first start off on stages and you build tech as a young woman, and they let you talk in places because maybe you fit a certain profile, and then you see a lot of anger, and your account gets hacked a lot, and you just get to the bottom of things, right? Like, you have to figure out things very quickly, otherwise there's a problem. And as a creator, you have to be alert to that. So that's why I took a step away from this whole media and stage thinking, and went back to the Greek islands, was working in the camps a lot with the military. At one point I got very much into engineering, and I shaved my head because I wanted to focus on my thoughts, and people were constantly telling me that I looked cute, and I didn't like that. So then, I guess then there was this phase on the islands where I started to manically organize things, like camps, internet, also the property of my parents, and people would freak out when I would organize them in a good way, because sometimes it's also about racism, that people don't want refugees, for example, to experience a nice situation, because they don't want them to stay. And so also with my family, when I structured things in an elegant way, I guess, like their houses, their properties, they would call me rude, they would call me insulting, against the generations before me, asking me who I think I am. And so I recognized that I have a kind of ability, but it's learnable, like anyone can learn that. But it was a little bit shocking. And at some point, because I just wanted to organize things, I decided to, take a step away from my family and also from my inheritance. And this actually got me back to data and back to science, because in order to be able to do that, I needed to have all the legal documents together. And I, said to my family that I would leave, and they gave me all these documents that were encrypted until a certain point in time, because they had kind of also taken control of my finances, which is something that I always thought, but it only became clear when I had the data. And when I had the full picture in front of me, it was totally apparent that this larger picture, it's almost like being an eagle and looking over things. I realized that my way of thinking was always right. And sometimes you have to stop believing in what people tell you and be a little bit like a doctor. And so then, I had a lot of psychedelic experiences as well that strengthened this understanding that there's an unshakable core that you can just rely on, and it's always there. And that, as a Greek Orthodox woman, that's very cool, because you just have a stability that's even, based on numbers. And so I guess it was one thing led to the other, and then you end up at some place. And today, when we also publish, reports for the World Datanomic Forum, we're very direct in our language. Many times I start writing these reports, and then they're changed afterwards a little bit. But the style of the reports is always very clear and a little bit ghetto. And when I was on the Greek islands, I listened to a lot of Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, and there was a lot of anger because I didn't understand the story. And so this punch in the face mentality, I guess, is also something that's important to get the argument out there. But I think it's also about the fact that people have this ability to organize data or to structure tech across very large regions who don't have a university degree, but maybe they're geniuses. And I know how people like that think, and I know that they have to come into the forum. So it's not going to be like the World Economic Forum where you have to wear a tie and you have to, be someone. You don't even have to disclose your identity. You can use a pseudonym. You can contact me also personally if you're working on an extreme innovation. And if you're responsible enough to understand that this will potentially have an impact on a lot of people, then you should talk about it with people. You should discuss it, and you have a moral responsibility. You are not just someone sitting behind his laptop or her laptop, playing games, trying to solve an equation. That's not it. And maybe you have withdrawn from society, but there's a lot of people like that out there who are building amazing things, and we can stick together. Like, now is the time for the weirdos to say it's not weird, it's amazing. And the forum is something like a protection also towards closed-minded people who have given you this one little sentence of that's not possible, you cannot do that, or all these insults of who do you think you are. And for us, or for me at least, it's very understandable to withdraw, but it's not the way forward. It will influence who we're building for, it will influence the way that we're building, what we're building, the attitude. And so I think it's really time to open up a forum for hardcore innovation, and to create a mindset around it that is just welcoming but also different,
I have to stop it because it's running out of time here.
Good.
But
I started drinking at like 4 or 5 because tech people, we can do that. Mm-hmm. And then she looked at me and she was like, "Are you kidding me?" Because we were at the bar together.
Yeah.
She was like, after 5 p.m., I never drink my espresso without vodka. And then I was like, okay, I like this lady. It's good.
Okay, so I need shorter answers. I just want to do like a few just short kind of answers. So like if you're going to try to describe to me like the World Datanomic Forum, is it true that it's kind of like open source software when that was launched, where it was just like, oh, now like Linux and all these different platforms and like operating systems are being developed and anybody can access it? Or is it sort of still a private group that you're curating?
It's
like, how can you relate it to another field where other people can understand it just in a short, I don't know if it's possible to do that, but. And remember, say,
it's a closed forum at the moment.
Say the Datanomic.
The Datanomic Forum at the moment is a very private and closed forum because there's a lot of people out there who are scared of what they're building, and we're trying to grow the relationship with them. So it's not open source, also because we don't own that data, right? So we can't just come and say, "Oop, there it is."
Okay. Where do you see this forum developing? Like your vision of this, 10 years from now, what do you imagine that this will look like?
So one, I would
say I imagine 10 years from now.
Okay. So 10 years from now, I want the forum to have a consultancy for governments that are bringing their data from 0 to 1, that have not digitized. That's one thing. That's also a way that the forum will make money. I want us to make foresighting predictions for the future, how things could be. It would be nice to have a voting mechanism so that anybody can vote, and so that we can actually, store this data securely and then show to the people what everyone has selected. And I guess I would like we've come up with this idea of the fifth dimension, where it's like a new market zone, where you as an individual can come and tell your ability, and other people with abilities are in there. It can be anything. It can be a psychologist. It can be maybe a private trainer. And then you can book each other, but you also provide your ability. And it's just this fifth dimension is just to showcase how you can organize things and really have a nice life and gain a lot from it without paying too much. So it would be cool if we could have resorts in 10 years, which is something that we're already planning, where you can just go and give your ability, and you pay a little bit of money and you get the tenfold back because it's well organized.
Just make sure this
is that okay?
That's great. That's perfect. Doesn't sound good. What are a few of those major things that issues, problems, or threats to civilization, human civilization, that you believe you'll be looking at, or just a few of these, climate change or refugees, or it sounds like it's all encompassing, but are there a few key critical issues that you think you'll be working towards solving problems?
So I think environmental things are at the top of our topics of what we're going to be looking at. Pollution, of course. It really depends on how easily you can access the data and how easily this data can be collected. And so Greenpeace, for example, has done great work with collecting data against stakeholders that have caused a lot of damage. And if you look at the environmental field of activism, there's a lot of great sources, right, and information. So we can develop a different relationship to corporates and show them that, and make predictions for the future as to, even welcoming scenarios for them, how they could improve, for example. So environmental stuff is one. And then for me personally, it's also justice is a very important thing. This has a little bit of a CIA aspect to it, because you can see the steps of people based on what they do. You can create a profile for their behavior, which is something that Facebook is doing. The Chinese government has started doing that. And in the forum, I want to start a discussion to say, no, this is not good. People should own their identity. And we should even go as far as to question the full authority of states. It's great if there are states, but it's also even better sometimes if there is no state, if the state has failed. Also to prevent war. and so to depict other scenarios and to help with that, like from a more philosophical point of view. That for me, like environmental and really this base of living. And the third pillar would be artificial intelligence and humans, as to this human right of imperfection, meaning that it's okay for us not to be robots. It's great that we're not robots, and we should celebrate that. And I guess the World Datanomic Forum is also in a situation where it's in the middle of AI and human intelligence and the heart. So yeah, it's also a very important topic for us, that people should not be machines. So it's environment, and the next thing is predictions as to state behavior, I guess, or political behavior, and the third one is AI. And then comes market dynamics. So how do you create a symbiosis between different companies that could really support each other, and arguments for partnerships based on clear numbers. So if you look at Volkswagen today or Chinese competitors that are going up, you know, and you have Goldman Sachs saying that China is going to fall. Every year they say China is going to fall, and China never falls. And it's because these guys are learning really fast. And my view is, if people would get a little bit into their heads that they can even increase their economic abilities if they don't invest too much in weapons and kill their people, so that their healthcare systems go down, so that no one goes to school anymore, and then, you know, you have to invest into more artillery, and there's super negative press, so no one invests in your country. I mean, guys, you know, and you can actually predict economic growth based on a peace scenario. It's comparative data. You can say in war zones, economic growth goes down. So this means that if you partner, the potential for economic growth to go up is much higher. And this is based on numbers.
That's great.
Sorry, I went on for a long time.
No, it's nice. It's just interesting to think about, you know, in places like Iraq or, you know, in Syria right now. They're starting to rebuild it, and companies are getting their foot in there. And I don't know if it's just this cycle where, like, companies do make a lot of money out of it.
Definitely, but this is not based on partnership, right? I'm talking about partnership. I'm saying if Iraq now would say, fuck the whole ideological conflict that we have with the US, and we will build partnerships because we believe in the potential of both countries, then it's very logical that they would both benefit. And I think if you publicly, you know, distribute this data over Twitter or Facebook, and it would reach a lot of people, then it would at least, even if it doesn't do anything at that point to the government, it would at least influence the guy with the Kalashnikov, who is very torn to war, because he will read it and tell his friend. And so that's activism again. Like, it's not rational. The guy will probably keep his weapon, but it's for the long-term change. That's it. Like, we don't care about plots, about conspiracies, we just care about the data. Are we done?
No.
Okay.
Well, I just have one.
I have to organize my stuff because they're gonna.
If you need to go, you can. I mean,
10 minutes.
Let's do a photo first time.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah, I will. I'll do one just with you too. Doesn't matter. It's nice. Very pretty. You look gorgeous.
Thank you.
So I was just curious, like, just personally, I mean, this, I don't know, this could be part of it or not, but, like, it seems like what you're doing is, like, competing with, like all the major companies are doing this.
Yeah.
Data track, Google and Facebook and blah, 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 like, everybody's collecting data, massive amounts of data. Like, what sets you guys apart in this forum apart from that? Will it be inclusive of, like, data that they aren't collecting that's insignificant to them because they're focused on capitalistic ends? You know what I mean? Whereas you're more like humanitarian focused. Is that sort of the angle?
Yeah, and we don't. So what separates us from companies that are gathering a lot of data, like Google or, everyone seems to be doing that these days, is that we don't want to gather data. We don't want to commercialize the data of people. We just want to make sense of things in a way that is good for the people. So the reports that we generate are based on state data, based on publicly accessible data, and it's not that we use your data in any way. We don't look into your accounts. We're not going to buy any data. We're just going to use what's there to make sense of it all. And our members are the ones that then have to act. It's a forum. A forum doesn't really take decisions. And the most of decision making that we will do is to paint scenarios as to how this data can be used. So, for example, if a government wants to, innovate and they don't know how, then we can use their data, and then we will be paid to organize this data and to say, look, you have options that are very appealing and appalling. Which one is it gonna be? So that's the difference, that it's not a money-making machine, because it's not about money, it's about peace and about life quality and joy and fun and inspiration. That's it.